And we want to thank Thurston Community Media and Robert. He records all of our talks and presentations, and then about 2 weeks later it comes onto channel 26 on Comcast, and you'll be able to see repeats. And in fact, if you go onto YouTube, you can see an archive of all of our history talks the past 3 years or so that are archived on that. So you type into YouTube, and then once you get onto that, go to Schmidt House History Talks, type that in, and that'll give you the whole lineup. Or Tumwater History will also get you to that. So either way, and you can sit for hours in front of that screen and watch all this stuff. Special setup today, as you noticed. We don't have the podium and a sound system, and we're not using the big screen. We're trying to go back to when this house was brand new, back in 1904. The main house was built, 1910 for this extension. So everything's over 100 years old except me. And we're not going to do the computer and PA system because we want to go back in history, all for the sake of our special guest. And really, he's not a guest speaker, rather he's our host. This is his house, and after all, we're his guests in his home. So it's not a speech or a program, but rather an informal conversation as he shares his memories of a very eventful life. And so we're going to be in character, or he is, and we're looking forward to him. I'm expecting him to be coming around the mountain when he comes. So they were the Schmidt family, very influential in Olympia Tumwater. And so the Olympia Tumwater Foundation that I'm the public history manager for was formed by the Schmidts back in, let's see, 1950. When did it form? It was there he is. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh. Mr. Schmidt, what an honor. Thank you.
Oh, oh my goodness. They told me to come up here, and I thought only a few people. What a nice crowd. Thank you for coming. You look so good today.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good to meet you in person finally.
Well, thank you. I know you from somewhere. No?
I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for inviting us into your home.
Thank you for being here today. It's my pleasure. I am Leopold F. Schmidt. Welcome to my home. Hope you are comfortable today. Now, what we'd like to talk about today is about the sense of who Leopold is, right? Not so much talking about the dates and the facts. You can read about that, or somebody knows about that more than I do, but don't worry about that so much. Today we're going to talk about what I've seen and done. Also, first of all, many of you came because you want to know possibly the secrets of making good beer. Good. So how many of you drink beer? Big hands, yeah. Okay, so if you don't drink beer, what else do you drink? Huh? Yeah, hard cider maybe? Yeah? Wine? Porter maybe? Stout? Yeah, but I am a lager man, of course, being from Germany. So what I want to tell you about this is, if you think about making good beer, it's like a job well done. Great amount of satisfaction from making good beer. There are many hard things to do in the world. There is building bridges, designing new roads and dams, new steamships and sailing ships. They're all very difficult things. But making beer tops them all. That is very difficult. Let me tell you why. Because imagine if you have Aunt Bessie, right? So Aunt Bessie makes cookies and pies maybe one day a week, right? Maybe Tuesday is baking day for her, maybe. So we try to stay away from Aunt Bessie because we like her pies and cookies. Maybe twice a week if she has some kids coming over. But remember that she only makes cookies and pies maybe one day a week, right? And if she makes a mistake and burns some of them, if you are Aunt Bessie's niece or nephew, you gobble it up anyway because you know what is good for you, huh? Right? Right? So Aunt Bessie can make mistakes. I cannot. I make beer 24 hours a day, every day, without stop, all year long. My beer is the best in Pacific Northwest, best in Portland, California. We ship around the world. We go to across the Pacific, and I'm very proud of our beer, but it is not easy to do. So you think about all of these people that drink beer, people who work on making dams, and they make steamships and everything else, run railroads, sit on big boards of directors, but they drink my beer. And they know they can depend on it. It is exquisite beer. Okay, so enough about my beer for a while. Now I'm going to talk about what it was like a little bit from my point of view growing up. I have a few minutes before I need to get back to making beer down the hill today. By the way, is this not a beautiful day today? It's a shame we're inside, but. So, now, Johanna could not make it today. She was shopping. She and Philippine went to Portland today, and they will be shopping. And she says, Leo, you talk too much. So she made me write down some notes for you so that I can keep it short. Okay, now I was born in 23 January 1846 in what later became Germany. It was Prussia at the time, yeah? And the history is interesting because Napoleon had been through in early 1800s. The Vatican was returning control of the lands to the local kingdoms and duchies. There were maybe 40 governing bodies in the area, not including Austria. And I was born 20 miles north of Frankfurt. How many of you have been to Germany? Do you know where Frankfurt is? Yeah. It takes a long time to get there by steamship and on railroad. So I don't wear a hat, but my hat is off to you because it is a long journey. Now, the unusual thing about Germany is the leaders decided they wanted to unify, and they tried several times to do this, but were unsuccessful when I was a boy. The reason is they wanted too much too soon, and they wanted kingdoms and grand duchies and the smaller duchies to give up control, and that was not good for the people because nobody wanted to be governed by one person. We were not ready for that yet. So in 1848, 2 years after I was born, people began leaving, and they were called the 48ers, and they went to United States. Now, that means that there was a lot of Germans living in United States. As a boy, I would hear about these stories. My father worked in, he was an engineer in the coal mines, and a very good mining engineer, very smart man, but we didn't see him because his political beliefs made him suspect, so he left. He was unhappy. So he went to United States in a place called Missouri. You will hear more about Missouri soon. Okay. Now, also I hear stories about how fun it is to sail. And I do not want to live in rolling farmland my whole life because I have, maybe you know, the itch to travel. You hear stories from all over Africa and South America, United States, England, and I want to go. So, age 14, I got my mama to agree. She allowed me to go to a school for seamen, and it was started by a company called HAPCO. There was a Hamburg, America packet line. They were the best sailing ship company in the world. They had a special school, and I was in the very first initial class that they had in what was that? I was 14, so yeah, I was 14. So anyway, I was in their first class, and they taught me a great many things. They taught me about seamanship, they taught me about leadership, they taught me about how to be a cabin boy and clean up. And they also taught me about something that was going to become very important. Since sailing ships are made out of wood, they taught me carpentry as well. As soon as I graduated, which was about a year later, what happened is I started to travel on the canals. From Holland, I went to all over the world. I went to Rio de Janeiro to pick up coffee. Oh, that was beautiful. And I went to Mediterranean many times. I was all over Europe. I was sailing in the Baltic. I sailed Atlantic Ocean. And at this time, if you remember your American history, this was the American Civil War. Yeah? So we made many, many supply trips from Europe, Amsterdam, over to America, bringing supplies. I got a chance to see East Coast of America, and I got to see New York. In 1866, I decided that I needed to improve my English. It's not so bad now. But my English then was not so good because we had an old German sailing crew, because we were owned by HAPCO, right? So I told the master to please tell HAPCO in Germany, in Prussia, that I was going to stay in the United States for a year. I did this, and I went to the Great Lakes. I sailed on the Great Lakes, and I visited various cities in Canada. And I decided, as winter was coming on and we could no longer sail, I really did not want to go back to Germany. I did not want to go back. I was scheduled to be second mate. Now that's very good. So in 4 years of sailing, I went from being a cabin boy to being a second mate on a major sailing ship, right? 3- and 4-mast ship. These are very big. And I had many men going to work for me. Now what happened was, I told him, and they were disappointed. It turns out that the ship that I was supposed to be on went to sea later and was never seen again. So, good thing for me, huh? Yeah, this is the first of many, many amazing things that happened. Also, the last ship I was on before I decided to stay in the United States, we had 172 people on board, I think, carrying passengers and cargo. And smallpox broke out on board, and 76 people died on that ship. Another close call for me. Now, when winter came, you cannot sail on the Great Lakes, of course. So what I did was I went to where some of my German relatives were. And I knew my father had stayed in that state called Missouri. How many of you have been to Missouri? How many of you are sorry you have been to Missouri? Okay. Well, in winter it's okay, but summertime it's not so okay. I had relatives that were living in areas near St. Louis, which is where the Missouri River meets Mississippi River. Are you okay? Okay, if it gets to be too much, you tell me, okay? Now, so I went to different cities and I earned money. I would stay with relatives and meet friends. Now, while I was staying in St. Louis, I heard about a job in a little town called Washington. Washington was about 20 miles upriver on the Missouri, on the south side, and the man needed someone to help him in his business. Now, he was making corncob pipes. Do you know there's a German name for this? I have a name for it. Meerschaum. No, but his business was Meerschaum. She's right. So what he did was, he used the money from the Meerschaum factory to invent a new way, and I helped him. I made a machine to make corncob pipes. Thank you. So, with the money from that, then I also went to another company in St. Louis, St. Joseph, and I learned how to make zithers, right? And I, to this day, do not like zither music. Okay. So while I was in St. Louis, my brother came over, my brother Louis, younger brother, and we decided that we would look for other opportunities. Both of us knew we had to work. We both had skills. I was becoming better at carpentry. I would make doors and sashes, right, frames for the doors, window frames, and fine joinery. And I made enough money to have a fine set of tools. One day I was walking and I said that I would like to consider going to Montana. Louis had no idea where that was. It turns out that Montana was at the other end of the Missouri River, which was 2,385 miles away. That's a long way. Now, we had been hearing stories about gold being discovered in 1864, I think, in Montana. And of course, it was not for us to make get rich quick. Not good. We knew that gold brings wrong kind of people. We do not like that too much. So what we did was, I'd been listening, and we earned enough money, me and Louis and a couple of friends, and we booked passage on a steamer called the Nick Wall in American. In German, it's Wall. Okay? Now, that was 1870. So I had been in Missouri now for maybe three and a half years, springtime. And the journey upstream is very slow, so it took us about almost 3 months on a paddle wheel steamer. There are several different types. How many of you know anything? How many of you have been on a paddle wheel steamer on Missouri? Some of you? Yeah, there's 2 types. One is very shallow draft, maybe a foot. And then there are some that are almost keel boats. That means that they have a keel underneath. Keel boats cannot go very far up the Missouri because, why? There was a painter named Catlin. And Catlin said of the Missouri River that it is too thick to drink and too thin to plow. And guess what? He was right. So between when I started hearing about these adventures upstream and the time we decided to go, maybe 70 or 80 paddle wheelers went upstream, and the farthest that they could go was Fort Benton in Montana. Now, that is a very, very long distance. Obviously, they could not carry enough wood, coal, food for the whole trip, right? So what had to happen every day is passengers would get off the ship and go cut wood. Oh, yeah. And there was, on our ship, there was 2 decks. One was called deck, right, the main deck, and that is where you put cattle and horses, and you put feed for the cattle and horses. And you put low-paying passengers. That was me and Louis. So we paid $35 each for the journey. It was a lot of money. It took us a long time to save this. Now, the next deck up is where all of the cabin passengers were. Cabin had chandeliers. They had exquisite dining with servants bringing food. They had vegetables. They had steak, fish, all kinds, elk, whatever, buffalo also, buffalo, which is another story. By the way, it was a stern wheeler. One of the reasons that it took so long is because there were so many buffalo while we were going upstream that we had to stop because the captain and the pilot decided they did not want to have bison in the back, right, getting tangled up in the, right, in the paddle wheel. So anyway, every evening, because we would not travel at night, we pulled over and cut wood. Passengers needed to cut, it depended on whether it was hardwood or cottonwood. There was only 2 types. And we either used dry wood from the snags on the sandbars, or we tried to find down trees. So in a typical day for hardwood, our ship burned 25 cords of wood a day. Where do you think we put the wood? It was on the deck where we were. Yeah, so my back still hurts from sleeping on top of wood. So we worked late in the night, and we cut cottonwood if we could not find anything else, and then for that we needed 40 cords of wood a day. It's easier to cut, but it burns like paper, so it does not make as much heat, not good for the boilers, hard to keep up steam. Took a long time. We finally made it to Fort Benton, and then we find out that we do not have enough money for transportation to Helena. That is 150 miles. And there's a toll road, I forget the name, that goes from where Fort Benton is and Cow Island, and it goes all the way over to Helena. It goes past Great Falls, a little teeny town. But we had no money, so we walked. And that took us a week. By this time, I am very tired of traveling, and it is getting late in the summer. So Louis and I arrive in Helena. We go to a small town west of there called Deer Lodge in Silver Bow County. Does anybody know where that is? Yeah, Deer Lodge? Yeah. Little teeny town, maybe 150 people. The reason we go there is land is cheap, and people are building houses. Helena also building houses, so not too hard to get to Helena. We soon made enough money working in placer gold fields. Do you know what placer gold is? Yeah? Not hard rock mining, where you need dynamite to blow things up, right? Yeah, you go with the pan. So you stand in the stream all day, freezing, and your feet turn cold and like pickles. Yeah? So we did that. We made money very quickly, but that was not why we were there. The reason we went to Montana was not for gold. It was to help the people who were living there in tents, because my trade happened to be woodworking, right? So I did build houses. I built a lot of houses. Helena, I built maybe, 30, 40 houses. Wood was very plentiful. And it was good money. I soon became a contractor in my own right. I still work, but it is easier to have many good people surround you. And there are plenty of people who find out that placer gold is very hard to come by. And it's easier to actually work building buildings, so they come to work for me. And between Louis and myself, we had several crews working all the time, constantly, year-round. We made very good money when we weren't working in placer gold, and anyway, the streams played out pretty quickly, so we were out of gold. People were still coming in, though, because they had not heard that the gold was running out. What were they going to do? Many of them are butchers. There's bakers, there are people who want to work in government, there's people who want to see if they can start a farm, raise cattle. That was brand new in Montana, in that part of Montana. To do all these things, they needed a place to live. Now, we had so many things going on at one time that I started to diversify. I bought land in Silver Bow County. I lived in Deer Lodge. We talked about Deer Lodge, yeah. Funny name, the Indians named it Deer Lodge, of course, because I like this very much, because deer were living there. So not so hard to understand, huh? Now we had, there we lived in Butte, also in Basin, which is near Butte. Then we started to diversify a little bit. At that time, Butte was not formally established as a city. It did not incorporate until 1876. I had been there now for 5.5 years, but the business opportunities in Butte were very good. So I moved to Butte and started business there. again, building houses. We also did other things as well. And if you look at some of the newspapers from that time, I had a partner. And one of our advertisements, because things happen and people die, is we would make custom coffins also. Yeah, it's a sad part, but very necessary, so that's what we did. Now, I decided not to raise cattle. I decided not to try to own stores. However, I got to meet a lot of very smart people during this time, especially business people, because we all needed to band together to start civilization in Montana. Now, one of the interesting things is I had a friend, his name was Pierre Valcho, from, of course, France. And Pierre owned a winery and a brewery. Winery not doing so well, but the brewery doing very, very well. And he asked me, he wanted to go back to France to visit the spa and maybe heal, because he was being sick. So he decided he would ask me to run his brewery. I know nothing about that end of the business. I only know when you have like this. I know this part of the business, right? I know that very well. And I said, yes, 1875. He comes back 1876. I make a decision that I am going to start my own brewery. And we have a lot of working people. People like beer. I like beer, so I could get free beer that way. Okay. We started very small. I took his brewmaster, and Pierre sold his business shortly thereafter because he was very sick. So we decided that we would name our brewery in the year 1876. Does anybody have a guess? What?
Century.
It knows all my stuff. Know my lines. It was called Centennial Brewing Company, of course, in honor of the 100th anniversary of United States independence. We did very, very good business. We started slow. We made maybe 500 kegs a year at that rate, because we had to import barley and hops. Soon we convinced local farmers to do this. Now, I wanted to point out to you one of the reasons that I like Missouri, especially around, I go back to Missouri now, is because the rolling hills, that part of Missouri reminded me so much of home. If you have ever been near Frankfurt, yeah? It's all rolling hills with small forests, very carefully placed. It's almost as if the Prussian people, of course, decide they want to have a forest here, and they put a forest there, another forest over here, and rolling farmland. Missouri, that part of Missouri, is almost exactly like that. So German colonists liked that very much, and I had a lively discussion by letter, back and forth, with people still living there, and they started what was called the Rhineland, and made wine. And to this day, they are still making Rhine wines, fine wine, in that area of Missouri. I debated briefly on whether I could do that in Montana and decided no, even though it has maybe the right soil in some spots, not where we were living. Beer is essential to life. It is a food, and I decided that is the way I would go. Now, 1876, and we stayed in that brewery business for a very long time. We competed with maybe 4 or 5 other breweries in the area, but we were easily the best. I discovered during that time that there was an easier way to sell beer. I charged $3 for a dozen bottles. You get the bottles for free, but I needed that money. It was very expensive beer, but it was very good because no one else made a clear, crisp lager like mine. All other beers had contamination, they were cloudy, and they tasted bad, and they used the wrong water. Keep track of that. How do you know that, huh? How do you know that, huh? So, we'll come back to that. Now, I decided in 1878, after brewing for a couple of years, that I needed to know more. So I hopped on a wagon, and I got on a railroad, and I went on a sailing ship, and I went back to Germany. I went to the only brewing academy in the world. That was back in a place called Worms, right? W-O-R-M-S, Worms, okay? And I stayed there for a whole year. And while I was staying there, I met a beautiful girl, and I got married, yeah. And her name was Johanna Steiner. Johanna is, she's 5 years younger than I am, and she would like to go to America. So the day after we got married, in 1879, I had graduated, we got on the train and we came back. So it took us from the time we left the next day until the time we got back in Butte. Big contrast. Took 5 weeks, which is pretty quick, right? Took us 3 days to get to the ocean, and then it took us a week across the ocean. Most of the time we took railroad. Now the railroad at that time only went to Pocatello. Didn't even stop in Pocatello, it stopped before, I don't know why. But here we go again, more walking, but this time I had money. So this time we took the stagecoach. We went from Pocatello, Idaho, down to Butte. Anybody know how far that is? 250 miles. When we got to Butte, Johanna would not talk to me. And seeing the good sense in this, I didn't talk to her. Okay, so Mama is not happy and nobody happy, but we have no children yet. Now, our first child, Peter, was born in 1880. Our second child, Francis, don't call him Francis, he likes Frank. So he was born in 1883. 1884, we went back to Germany to visit because we had left in a hurry. Business was so good, I decided I would leave that in the hands of my partner, a man named Peter Sales, and doing very well. We could afford it. We went back and visited relatives, and we had Leopold Jr. while we were there. So son number 3. We came back in 1884. We had a son named Adolf. We had a son named Frederick in 1887. And our last child was very hard. We had to practice a lot for this one. Was 1895. So 15 years between Peter and our last child. And our last child's name was Philippine. Beautiful daughter. I was very happy. Johanna was very happy. We lived in Butte. There are several sections in Butte. How many of you have been there? Do you know the mines there? Silver mines? Yeah? Okay, so the smelter is going all day, every day. Never stops. Like making beer, only is more smelly. Now, the bad part about this is, where we lived in Butte, we didn't get the fumes so much. However, it was terrible. We had extreme amounts of smoke when the wind would shift from the north and blow. And we would be breathing smelter fumes. Keep that in mind for later, okay? Now, we lived there until 1895. In the meantime, I had discovered, while raising a family, that I no longer wanted to be in the construction business, so I sold off all of that. Louis helped me in the brewery. He's very smart, very good, and good brother. He supported me. Of course, he got a lot of beer too out of the deal. Now, I was elected twice to county commissioner for Silver Bow County. That included Anaconda and Deer Lodge. And then I was on the Constitutional Committee. It turns out there was actually 3 constitutional committees. The first 2 were rejected, and it was finally the last one. That was near 1886, 1887. We spent over a year crafting a constitution that was acceptable to the territorial governor at the time. The good thing about this is now I could go outside again. So working indoors is not good. I got to be very cranky about that. But in 1889, November, I believe it was President Garfield, I think, declared that Montana was a state, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, all at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is a peanut gallery. So, 1889, very important year. I was elected to 2 terms in the House of Representatives because I decided that I could best use my energy and my talents to give back to people. It was very important to me to represent people from that part of the state. Eastern part is all farming, 1,000-acre farms, ranches. In the mountains where we were in the foothills, we had very small land. There was some ranching going on. They needed adequate representation in Helena. So I did a lot of travel between Helena and Butte, back and forth all the time. This started to wear me out. Also, I discovered that Johanna was becoming very tired at this time. And me too, because we had been working nonstop for many years. Now, I don't know about you, but when you reach a certain age, you decide it is better to take a nap. I like to take naps. So I managed to get my way after my 2 terms were up in the state legislature on the building committee for the state capitol. That was fortuitous because I had an ulterior motive. I wanted to go back to the ocean. I wanted my children to be raised where they would be having a view of ships and the smell of the ocean. We could have fresh seafood. I could tell them some of my stories, and they would be good. Now, at this time, 1895, also there was a scandal that was going on with the building committee, and I did not want to be involved. 2 men that were in charge of the building committee, businessmen, decided that they wanted to run things their way, and this was not my way. I like to work together. I like things to be discussed. These men did not want to discuss so much, and they met in private too much. It turns out that was a good decision on my part because in 1905, the lawsuit was finally settled against them for fraud and using shoddy materials on the new capital in Montana. So again, hard work is its own reward, and I needed to get away from those people. Now, 1895, I decided that I would take myself and a couple of other members from the committee, and we started looking at other capitals. So we went to Carson City, Nevada. You know what that is? And we went to Salem, Oregon, Sacramento, California. And we looked at what they were building. We also came to Olympia. Now, they were in the planning stages for building their first capital. That was, I believe, downtown, near Sylvester Park, yeah? Yeah? Okay, do this. Okay. Okay. Now, we had, when I got to Olympia, I had been reading ahead and researching and listening to people who had been here. Immediately started looking for a place to live because this is exactly where I wanted to be. Had a big calm bay, I wanted to have my own launch. I wanted to open another brewery. And of course, I had to be near water because we needed to transport. Railroads were not so good out here yet. And freight cost too much. I could control things if I went on water. Now, also we had huge farmland here, right? I could get all the hops and barley that I needed. But the most important thing, you will never guess, it's a secret. Can you see this back there? Yeah? Okay, that is my brewing secret. No, but there are more. There are more brewing secrets, I will tell you, because I want you to stay. I discovered that the artesian water, and this is no joke, this is for real. I sent 2 demijohns to Chicago to a testing lab, and it was the best water that they had ever seen, and immediately sent me back a telegram and said that the water was excellent. Now, the qualities that make good beer are exactly what was here. It's not just water coming out of the ground. It's soft water. It has certain mineral content, and it has to have a certain flavor. And it must be very consistent. We had all of those things here. We had never had that stuff when we were in Montana. So I knew, being a brewer, I knew that I had hit the mother lode, right? So I immediately bought a parcel on the Deschutes River. It used to be the tannery. And I immediately commissioned Lewis to start building. So he started arranging to purchase materials. I returned immediately to Montana, and I took my son Peter with me. And 3 weeks later, we were back here. Peter, at 15, was a grown man and very responsible. And he was also very knowledgeable about brewing. So not only did he have a good business sense, he was also willing to help me in the brewery. Peter was my first technical manager at the brewery. We built a 2-story wooden brew house. I wanted to start slow because I am frankly getting tired now. 1895, 1896, I am approaching 60 and slowing down. Would like to take it easy. So what happened was, there were breweries in Tacoma and Seattle. And due to the financial panic in 1893, 1895, where banks collapsed, many breweries were in very bad shape. They could no longer afford to make a good product. In 2 years, I had captured all of the lager business for all of Pacific Northwest. Everything north of the Columbia River was mine. I could not expand quickly enough. We decided that we would tear down the wooden building and build a stone building down here. It is beautiful, huh? And we kept expanding and expanding. Our peak year, we were making more than about 50,000 barrels a year. Also during this time, because I was so very profitable and very good at making beer and did not spill very much, I bought Port Townsend Brewery. I bought the Bellingham Brewery. I bought a brewery in Salem. I went to San Francisco and I bought breweries there. I was exporting beer across the ocean on ships. It was very popular in the Far East. Also, my beer, believe it or not, was eventually sold in some of the hot states. This is good. It's sold in Arizona. And I could not make enough beer. But I was very tired, and I am now at the point where we are doing so well that I must take a break. I hired a manager as an accountant, and it turns out it was a very good decision. He started at the lower level, like everyone does in my business. Everyone starts in the first floor brew house, and you clean and you make malt, and if you know how to make beer, if you know anything about this process in large quantities, it's hard work. So what happened was, Peter started down at the bottom. He worked his way up. He became brewmaster, and he stayed there for many years. I hired a man as accountant called Frank Kinney, one of the best decisions I ever made. Frank eventually turned into my senior manager and ran my brewery here. He runs my brewery now. He is coming along very nicely. I have many associates as well. One of them in San Francisco has his eye on Filipina. And you know, if you are a father and you have a daughter, yeah, this is how you think. So I gave them my blessing. They will be married sometime soon. They have not set a date yet. Now, unfortunately, as I look back, I realize that there is a movement coming in the United States that I cannot stop. And it is wrong, because beer is not evil. Beer is more a food. It is a happiness, a joy. When it is made well, it is almost like elixir. It is dependable. My beer is unique because it never fails. It is always clear, it's always crisp, always made from very good ingredients. People come from all over the world to learn how I make it. I'll not tell them. But I will tell you. So this is the secret. One of the secrets that I discovered on my own was the yeast that you make beer from has to be pure. It cannot be contaminated with bacteria. It cannot be contaminated with other yeast cultures. Once you have that mother yeast, you keep that in a special room. And there's only 1 or 2 people that go in there. I am one of them, and I take a look at the records and make sure that the yeast is always pure. If we suspect that it is not good, we get more. We throw that out. Also, all of our beer making machinery is absolutely pure. Most breweries do not do this. They simply wash it out and start brewing again. Not us. Everything is purified. It is sanitized. We use only the cleanest bottles, cleanest water. Everything is cooked. We make sure that we filter, sometimes 36 times, to get the very best beer. Not cloudy ever. As I said at the beginning, you remember I said, making beer is easy. Making great beer, that is hard. So, that is what I do. I'm Leopold F. Schmidt. Welcome to my house. Do you have any questions for Leopold?
I do, a couple. When you were sailing and bringing supplies to the United States, were you bringing them to the north or the south, or both?
Very good question. Most Germans were pro-North. This caused many problems in cities like St. Louis, where there were riots. The governor and mayor called out troops, Union troops, against us because the city was deeply divided. It wasn't that we were necessarily wrong. It was that they wanted to restore order, and I think they were correct for the time. I do believe in order. I do believe in rule of law. I was not part of that. However, there are many of the 48ers who came over who were very outspoken about this and predominantly supported Union. However, during the Civil War, Missouri River and Ohio and Mississippi were blockaded. So it didn't matter anyway. But yeah, that is mostly where our master went with our ship. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
Did you live to see the state capitol built in
No.
1928?
No, I have no idea. As you can see, I'm still alive. Somehow. But we were, when I came here, we were only planning. Now, planning for the new state capitol to be built on top of the hill started in 1911. right? And that is as far as my memory goes. Yes, sir.
Fun fact, South Dakota was also a state on the same day. Did you leave any relatives in Butte? Are there any members of your brother's family or anyone?
Yes and no. All of my children, of course, came with me. Louis came with me as well. I did not leave any close relatives there. Everyone, if you look in the records, as I did when I bought land, there are many Schmidts. So Schmidts all over the place, but maybe distantly related. You know, if I knock on someone's door named Schmidt, a friend would say, you know, you talk just like him. Maybe you are German too. So I go visit, and we make friends all the time. But no. Very good question. Yes, sir.
Did all your children work in the beer business?
All of them, except for Philippine, but she also worked helping me in make some decisions on some matters of advertising. She also advised me on softening some of my rougher edges, perhaps. She became Johanna's supporter as well. When Johanna becomes ill and cannot work very hard, she talks to me. So all of the boys worked in some capacity in my brewery. Peter was most notable. Adolf went to California. Frank went to California. He went to Los Angeles. But all of them, again, worked their way up. They had better. Yes?
So, at one point you said the smoke from the smelter, that you would come back to that. Were there any negative implications from breathing that?
Another, loose ends. I left some loose ends, so thank you. I believe that it is making me sick even now. I believe it made Johanna sick. It was making people around me sick. The water was not good. We actually moved out of Butte in 1891 and went to Deer Lodge. What I told them was the schools are better, but that was not really the case. I needed to be away from a smelter. Yes, sir.
You started talking about this trend in America to ban alcohol. What do you think the company will do to survive if that happens?
We are currently lobbying intensely through press. I pay for print ads in the local paper, which is called the Washington Standard. If you go pick up a copy today, you may see a print ad from us. It's not a full sheet, but it talks about the value of beer. It is not evil. Please, when you consider how to vote in Washington State or in Oregon, please consider that we would like to stay in business. Maybe hard alcohol can be included in prohibition if it does happen. But beer, please leave beer alone. It is part of culture. It's part of American way of life. Many people have it daily with their meals. Yes, we took advantage of laws. We owned houses, also known as saloons. That was legal. We have been selling off all of those for years. We do not own any saloons anymore because that's not fair. So if prohibition does happen, the indicators are that it will happen locally first before it goes national, because Oregon and Washington State seem to be more inclined to prohibit alcohol manufacture and sales. There would be exemptions for sacred wine, of course. But every day it seems more and more likely prohibition will happen.
So what else can you make in this brewery?
We have plans, this is secret, but are your friends, can you keep your mouth shut? We will do what we have to do. We will sell maybe a carbonated fruit juice of some kind. There are some specialty berries that grow here and nowhere else. We will try that. I have some every once in a while. Philippine likes it also, and I'm looking at doing this in Portland as well. We will test it and see how it works. I do not hold out a whole lot of hope because sales would be minute compared to what we are selling in beer now. We estimate that we will have total capacity, all breweries going maybe approaching 200,000 to 500,000 barrels a year of beer. It's an enormous amount of beer. That's a lot of cash flow. And to suddenly shut that off, we would have to close breweries. And we would not be alone. Yes, sir.
When did you become an American citizen, or did you?
I did. I became an American citizen twice. The first time apparently didn't take. 1875, I declared my loyalty to United States, and I no longer declared allegiance to the King of Prussia. However, I declared again in Silver Bow County in 1876 in the centennial year. If you go look in the county records, you will find that. I'm very proud of that, having become an American citizen. And that one I signed Leopold F. Schmidt. Very big. Good question. Very proud to be American.
I understand a lot of Germans like drinking warm beer. Was your beer warm, and when did it become popular?
Never made warm beer. Never. It's cold. Lager process is cold, and it's bottom beer.
But a lot of people in Germany still drink not warm, but not refrigerated beer.
That is an acquired taste, yeah. And that comes from being in your mother's womb, and she drinks it. Yes. No, in fact, all of our breweries were also, we made very large amounts of ice. The Bellingham Brewery, I bought that one specifically because they had the capacity to make 60 tons of ice a day. So we also had an ice business, which might be another thing to look into, but you cannot make much money on ice. Yes, sir.
Hotels? You bought hotels?
Numerous hotels. At one time, I owned transportation companies. I was looking into hotels, thank you. Owned the Olympian. I owned Bellingham. We purchased the Byron Hotel, and Henry Shoup told me he was going to rename it the Leopold, and I thought that was the silliest idea. Eventually, my hotel ownings I will combine. Also, now that I am slowing down, I have created an estate. It's a family trust, and all of the members have voting shares. Does that answer your question? I want to thank all of you for listening to my poor English today. All right, thank you.